Hello, everyone. Sorry about that little false start, Alan.
That's
but
okay, no
we're live.
worries.
But we're live
Hung up
now.
on there.
Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for joining myself, and I'm sure some of you will know Allan Whyte from Voices for Scotland, but I'll do a formal introduction. Alan, thanks so much for joining us on Yes Corner number 5. Every 2 weeks, we look to try and concentrate on a resource that the movement can use to help us, hopefully, eventually, win independence. So just be great to hear from you, and hopefully we'll be getting some questions in from our audience. So the first question I have for you, Alan, is can you start by explaining the objectives of Voices for Scotland and how the kind of organisation's funded and set up?
Yeah, sure. So Voices for Scotland was founded by the Scottish Independence Convention in 2019. I'm still struggling with years at the moment because 2020 was just a total wipeout. I'm trying to, but yeah, it was early 2019. Voices for Scotland was set up by the Scottish Independence Convention as a campaigning organisation for independence, but a campaigning organisation with a bit of a difference to perhaps other organisations that are out there. I suppose if you're campaigning for independence, you're essentially doing two main things. You're either maintaining the support that already exists for independence, or you're there to grow the support that could potentially exist for independence. And that's really where we come in as Voices for Scotland. We want to grow support, and to do that we need to speak to people that are unsure about how they would vote when a referendum comes along. So really the core principles of Voices for Scotland is that we're a non-party political organisation, so we have no affiliation to any political party. We we can maybe talk about more about what the reasons for that, but non-party political. We're a civic organisation, so we're led by people. We involve people as much as we can. We're not prescriptive in any way that we talk about the policy issues that people need to focus on or what people should be campaigning on. We host events and discussions where people talk about what's important to them, really with the purpose of creating a vision of what an independent Scotland could be, but it's an independent Scotland that works for you as an individual, or as a community, or as a collective, or as a social group, whatever that might be. So it's really about creating that vision for what an independent country could look like. We don't really focus so much on the process. We leave that to party politics, in terms of referendum and all the rest of it. More interested in what is the independent Scotland like for you, for us, and what steps do we need to take to get there. So that's really the core of why Voices for Scotland exists.
So is the object, you said that, and I really like the way you split those two campaigning organisations, because I think that's really helpful. It's a campaigning organisation that supports the movement, the people who are already yes, and then other parts of the movement who concentrate on the people who are, I call them not yes yet. That's who we are. Well, and yeah. Voices for Scotland is focused on that. Is there any way of kind of measuring that success? How do you gauge that? If you're looking to turn no's to yes, how do we kind of measure that? Have you got any feel for that?
It's really challenging. It's really challenging to engage in the first place, and it's really challenging to measure that as well. So I call them the indy curious, because if you think about support for independence or the union as a spectrum, you've got people who are staunch unionists, they're never going to change their mind. You get people that are staunch independence supporters, they're never going to change their mind. But there's this group in the middle, and as you get towards the very middle, they could go either way. And it's that area of the spectrum that we need to focus on if we're going to grow support. But it's quite difficult to engage those people in conversation and discussions about Scotland's future, because there's lots of associations within. If you're an independence organisation, then you're probably associated with SNP, for example. So you and I, and probably people watching this discussion this evening, and everybody who campaigns for independence is at the forefront of your mind. You think about it almost every day, you think about campaigning. But for the majority of people in the population, it's not. there are more important things for them right now. It's their own personal circumstances as we come out of lockdown. They could have been the unfortunate people that have suffered a bereavement over this time, and so there are other areas that take priority over independence. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to reach them through the existing supporters for independence right now. So we have we've had different events, and our model is really based on this idea of peer-to-peer influencing. So what that basically means is, if there's something that I'm interested in, if I'm passionate about independence, so in my case, I see independence as a fantastic opportunity for our country to alleviate poverty, particularly child poverty in this country, because we'll have all the borrowing powers and the fiscal measures that we can employ to do that. If that's important to me, it's going to be important to other people like me. So other people in their mid-30s, live in a city. That's what matters to me. However, somebody who maybe lives up in the northeast of Scotland, in a fishing community, for example, they may have other interests, they have other reasons why independence is important to them. And what we're trying to do as an organisation is we're trying to connect people that are similar. We want to get everybody together, but connect people that have similar interests. We want to connect the independence supporters with people who are the indie curious, people that have those same sort of demographics. Because what then happens is that if I was chatting to somebody else who wasn't sure about independence, and I explained to them why it's important to me, there would be some aspects of that would resonate with them. And what's important about that is it's not coming from a politician. It's not coming from some sort of authority figure. It's coming from somebody like them. And that's really our whole approach. And that's why we're not party political. That's why we don't have any sort of figureheads as an organisation. We don't want to have that. There are other organisations that do that. The independence movement has got different organisations doing different things, and it's really important that we have that, because there's lots of different voices saying similar things but in a different tone.
Yeah, I'd just like to pick up on something there, Alan, because I agree with you completely, and I think this is really important for campaigners, is that we probably look across our group of friends and relatives who we know are potentially yes voters. And I like to think that my mate John, right, he goes to watch Scotland every week. He's like Tartan Army, absolutely solid Tartan Army. If I want to kind of get him across to yes, I'm pushing him towards something like Now Scotland, because they've kind of, they've got that I think will appeal to him. My mate Ewan is completely different. He's an ex-Tory voter, thinks about things a little bit differently, is older, is looking for the peer influence. And I'm thinking, do you know what? I point him towards Voices for Scotland, because I think it's important that that's what we do as campaigners. We think about who do we really want to speak to, our potential yes voters. And I think if we're ever in the situation where we've only got one body with one voice, then it makes it a little bit harder. I'd love to see what anyone who's watching thinks about that. Should we be trying to reform a kind of Yes Scotland one size fits all, or do you think the approach we've got at the moment as a movement, where we've got different voices speaking differently to communities, is the way to go? So I'll let you know what our audience think about that.
Yeah, I would love to hear from the audience and have questions or comments on that, because I think it's really important. What I've noticed over my time campaigning over many years, but recently, I think we need to. What I always encourage people to do is to ask themselves why it is that they support independence. So we set up this sort of mini campaign, which is running, and encourage people to do it. If you go onto our website and there's a thing called Your Voice for Scotland, or Be a Voice, and you can upload a video, telling us a 1-minute video saying why it is that you support independence. Your elevator pitch for independence, and it's personal to you. So you don't need to talk about the currency but why is it really important to you? And the reason why we came up with that is because we want people to interrogate themselves first and remind yourself why it is that you support independence. Because I found this was for me as well. This is where it came from. Is somebody asked me why I support independence, and I was like almost taken aback. It's like, well, oh God, I've not thought about it for a long time, because I've been campaigning for independence since 2013, whenever it was that I kind of got involved with the campaign back then. And because it's been so long, it just becomes part of your identity, and it just becomes this inherent trait within you that you don't question. like almost like the football team you support. You know, I don't question why I support the football team you support. Maybe I should.
Yeah, or what, you know, why do you love your kids?
Yeah,
you know, if someone asks that question,
my niece and nephew, yeah, no, whatever, yeah.
It's interesting because again, I'm trying to look for those kind of consistency. When we helped out Believe in Scotland, we ran one of their events for them, and we pushed them towards this idea of storytelling and how important it is to be able to tell your story. It was actually it was almost a 3-day event, but the best bit of that event was when we pulled up Yes campaigners. We gave them a structure, we pulled them up onto stage, and they gave the kind of, no one speaks for a minute when they're speaking about independence. I think they were all like 3 to 5 minutes, but they were able to say it, and I think this is absolutely crucial. I think any support that we can get from Voices for Scotland or other organisations that help people kind of condense that, and I think there's also a catharsis when you actually sit down and really think about what it is, and it can galvanise you as well. So I think it's really, really important. I just pulled up a comment there from New Scotland TV.
Yeah, 100.
So, you know,
yeah, listen, I mean, you can never have too many people campaigning for independence. Absolutely not. And I think this is really super, super important. When it comes, so hopefully after this election in May, we're going to have a much better idea of when a referendum is going to be. Now, we need to be like actually really realistic about what's going to happen. Is that as a movement, the independence movement is not going to have as much money as a unionist movement. But what we have are passionate people that are willing to go out and campaign. So we're going to need everybody to be campaigning, making the positive case, and I stress positive. We need to really make the positive case for independence, and everybody needs to be involved, because we probably don't have the resources that the unionist campaign has. So it's so important that we have as many people and organisations campaigning in a positive way. But one of the points I just wanted to make when I was talking about people interrogating themselves about why it is they support independence, it's really important, because you need to be able to tell people, if you bump into somebody in the street, you need to be able to tell them quickly why it is you support independence. You can't bump into them in the street right now, so you can go on our website to Be a Voice and you can upload your video and tell them. But one of the things that I've noticed with some people is I think there's a slight nostalgia for 2014, that they want that feeling back. They want that energy back and that positivity about a campaign. And I absolutely understand it, but it's not going to happen, because it's a very different landscape, very different political landscape. It's a very different environment. The way that we use media, the way that we access information is even 7 years ago is very, very different now. So I think that's another reason why we do need to have different organisations, not just one Yes organisation. I know there were other organisations in 2014, Radical Independence, did some campaigning with them and things like that. But I think we need a broader spectrum of organisations that represent the public, that represent the existing independent supporters, and represent those indie-curious potential independent supporters. That's why we need this plethora of organisation and voices coming forward making the case.
Yeah, I would agree, and it'd be good to see what people who are watching, what they think as well. But do you think post Holyrood the movement's in a better position than it was in, let's say, the middle of 2013 or the end of 2013 when we were properly campaigning? Do you think we're in a better position to start?
100% better position, because we've had 20 odd polls in favor of independence. There are reasons for that over the course of the pandemic, which we can maybe touch on, or maybe people have got their own ideas. If they want to put their comments up, they can do that. But we're in a far better position, because number one, the support is much higher now, and that's a much better platform to build upon. I think that the political landscape is very different. I think that not just in terms of Brexit and the undemocratic way that's happened, that Scotland obviously voted massively in favour to remain a part of the EU, yet we find ourselves out with the EU now. But I think also it's the personalities and the characters within politics, and particularly in Westminster, that there are, I mean, it's difficult for me to, as here as Voices for Scotland as a non-party political organisation, to talk about that. But you know, there are some questionable characters in very high office in the government in Westminster that have acted in a way that has completely eroded any trust that the public might have in the institutions. And in terms, and it is awful, it's shocking behaviour that has been carried out. Particularly, we've seen over the pandemic with dodgy contracts, hoarding of PPE, that sort of stuff. Just, you know, really, really awful stuff. And that has obviously had an impact upon how people view politics. It all feeds into the narrative of looking at the system, the status quo that we have now, and looking at what we could have. And that's, again, to come back to the work we're doing with Voices for Scotland, it's really about setting out that vision for the country that we want to be, and not just the country that we want to be in terms of the policies on how that might affect you, but also the way that government works and governance works. You know, I think the work that the Citizen Assembly has done over the past year or so has been tremendous. And my view would be that there's a role for a Citizens Assembly as a form of government in the country, and it comes back to the democracy as well. You know, that Scotland as a nation is able to vote for a government, and that government to be elected on a manifesto and spending plans for that benefit the country, rather than, you know, people in Scotland paying for HS2. Yeah. You know, well,
I certainly I agree, and let's see what our viewers. But I do think that the vision that we portray for an independent Scotland has to be very different from where we currently are in the United Kingdom, and, you know, not wanting to go too much into the political side of it. I think that we have got to make really clear breaks on why we will be different from the United Kingdom, and I certainly think there's certain camps within Scottish politics that I don't think we're going quite far enough to differentiate ourselves from what happens in the United Kingdom. We're going to go through some more of these questions about Voices for Scotland, because all that's absolutely fantastic stuff. We mentioned, you mentioned the Scottish Independence Convention, who set you up. Is it because they're still in existence? So very briefly, what's the kind of relationship between both of you in terms of funding and looking over the oversight of the organisation?
Yeah, so there's not really a massive overlap. So the structure of Voices for Scotland is that we have myself and my colleague Clara, who are two part-time members of staff, and then we have a board. And I think there are spaces on the board that are reserved for SIC, for Scottish Independence Convention members. So currently on our board are the convener and vice convener of the SIC, so that's Maggie Chapman and Ian Black, respectively. So they sit on the Voices for Scotland board. But in terms of the actual sort of day-to-day running of the organisation, we are autonomous, and we sort of take our own path and do what we see is the right thing for our campaign, based on those principles which I laid out at the start of this conversation.
And those objectives. So what about raising funds? How have you been going about doing that? I know Independence Live, we helped with one of your big events. I was going to say at the start of this year or at the end of last year, but as you said, who knows? It wasn't that long ago.
What is time? So fundraising it's been. I'll just be really brutally honest. It's a real challenge, because as a political organisation, we can't do adverts on social media. So our funding basically comes from members of the public giving us small donations every month. And that's been really, really challenging over the last year, because for a number of reasons. First of all, at the start of the pandemic, we took the decision, a really, really difficult decision, to well, and also the right decision, might add, to stop campaigning, to stop our everyday actions. And you might look at that now and say, well, why would you do that? But cast your mind back to that March and April last year, when nobody really knew what coronavirus was, nobody really knew how dangerous it was. We went into lockdown, and lockdown seems like almost normal. We're accustomed to it now, but at that time it was definitely the right decision to stop our campaign. It would have seemed a bit crass, I felt, we all felt, to be campaigning for independence at a time when hospitals were filling up and people were dying. But because of that, funding sort of dried up a little bit. So we're getting by, but we are absolutely reliant on public support. So if anybody watching this does want to support the work we do, you can go to our website and donate there, and that would be greatly appreciated, particularly because we've got some really exciting stuff coming up in the next few months, which we really think can have a big impact on what I spoke about earlier, and reaching those people that are in the middle of that spectrum, those indie curious, undecided people. We've got some great ideas for that, but we need to get some more funding. We have, we recently really got a grant, a good sized grant to start that work off for some development, which has been brilliant. But we're a civic organisation funded by people, so we need people to if what I think is really important is people look at Voices for Scotland and they understand the role that we have within the movement. And I'm obviously biased. I think we've got quite an important role in the movement because we've got a very specific audience, and our aim is to grow support for independence, so that when the referendum does come along, support has been increased. But importantly, people are really informed about the issues around the independence, and when they walk into that booth and put an X next to the support for independence, they feel confident and informed in the decision that they're making. That is really what we want to do. And if people believe in that goal for Voices for Scotland, I really would urge you to give us a few quid every month, because it really helps our work to go forward. If we've got very quickly just a little bit of time just to say a little bit about what our plans are going forward. We are developing this new platform called Voices Connect, which you'll hear a lot more about in the next few weeks. But it's a way to connect, as I described earlier, connect people all across the country based on what their issues are and what's important to them. So we'll have people who are existing independence supporters able to connect with those that are indie curious. They want to learn a bit more about independence, but they don't want to learn about it from biased media or from politicians. They want to learn about it from people like them, and that's what we are creating. So that's the process has begun with that. We got some. That
sounds really interesting. And I take it people can go onto the Voices for Scotland website, sign up to newsletters or anything like that to find out a little bit more about how they can get involved.
Absolutely, yeah. So if just have a wee look at our website. The other thing we're doing at the moment is we're redeveloping our website. So the one you're looking at will be is the old one, but that'll be getting changed over in the next 3 or 4 weeks. But all the information's there. Everything you need to know about Voices for Scotland is there, including how to sign up for our newsletter and also how to donate to us as well. But also we're not like precious in it. If anybody wants to get in touch with us, you can email us, you can get us on social media, and we'll get back to you.
Well, there you go. Someone's looking for you to get involved in the podcast, so I'll make sure to pass on the details. But yeah, I think that's so important that we're able to contact and get in touch with all of the different organisations that we have within the movement, for sure.
Yeah, no, listen, that's what we're all about. I mean, I suppose Voices for Scotland has sort of evolved a little bit, and because it is just myself and Clara, I guess a little bit of our personalities have actually come into this sort of the DNA of what the organisation is. And, we are both like really open and really always willing to work with people. And, obviously we worked with yourself, William, on the big Indie Night In, which was, a really great, example of what our organisation is. It's people coming together in a really positive way and talking positively about independence and the opportunities. But it's that collaborative way of working and setting out that positive vision for the country that we can be if we do vote for independence.
And then you kindly offered your content for free for our event at Hogmanay, which raised nearly £1,000 for charity. So again, I think that's a good example of just our organisations and working together. We just can't be too precious about what it is that we're doing.
At the end of the day, we've all got the same goal. Like everybody who within the movement, everybody who supports independence, we've all got the same goal. We want an independent country. We might have different ideas about what the independent country might look like. We might have different ideas about the political party that should be the first government in an independent country and what our priorities might be.
We get
ultimately, we all want the same thing. So it's really, really important that we all work together. We've got different paths to the same destination.
So we're not in the height of the pandemic that we were when you stopped campaigning in February and March last year. What are you doing over this kind of strange election period? With a few weeks left, are you campaigning or have you stepped back?
No, this has actually been a great time for us to do a bit of planning and do a bit of work in the background. So, like I say, we're upgrading our website to make it much easier to use. So we're redeveloping our website. We are, like I say, we've been developing this new platform, this Voices Connect, that we'll be launching when it's done with the developers. We're doing planning as well and planning for upcoming events as well. As we're not party political, we just took a decision not to get too involved with the elections coming up, which is it goes against all my instincts, because I just want to be at the forefront of it, because it's. But yeah, so we're kind of taking a little bit of a step back just now, which has given us a great time to plan, and we're bringing some new people on board with. Maybe hopefully to our board, but nothing's confirmed yet. But people with incredible experience, who will be so helpful. So I can't name any names just now, but the caliber of people we're hopefully bringing onto our board who are supportive of what we're doing is fantastic. So there's lots of really, really great stuff coming up, and it's a really, really exciting time for us as an organisation, but for the movement as well. And I think I want people to keep that in their mind. There's so much positive stuff, there's so much things to be positive about within the independence movement, and we've got to hold on to that, because there's also a lot of negativity flying around as well. All the chat from unionist parties in this election is about how divisive a referendum be. It's divisive this, divisive that. It doesn't have to be divisive, and that's again what Voices for Scotland is trying to do. You look at what happened with Brexit, and what we're working towards is the complete opposite of that. But the Brexit campaign was designed to be divisive. It was designed to entrench people. It was designed to get people fighting against each other. That cannot be, and that will be the tactic. That will be the unionist tactic again. They'll want people they'll want to make it dirty. They'll want to make it nasty. And we've got to be, as a movement, we've got to be so positive to stop that from happening. We can't let it be divisive. So you don't take the bait on social media. Stay positive and keep talking about what your positive vision is for an independent country.
Well, we've had a really positive comments on the chat there, and and some advice as well in terms of social media and slogans, and how we do really need to. I think that peer to peer is really, really important, and we all know that. And from 2014, it's persuading the people that you think can be persuaded, and if we do that, independence is not far away. Allan, thanks very much for your time. I really hope that we've brought Voices for Scotland a little bit more attention to the movement. It's definitely something that we really need to use. Any final words before we head off?
No, just thanks very much for having me, and thanks to everybody who's tuned in tonight. And like I say, we're very open. If anybody wants to get in touch, get us on social media. You can email us and check out our website. Very happy to chat through ideas. And if you want to volunteer or get involved, the more the merrier. Well up for it.
Brilliant. Well, I'll leave the last words to Colin Jackson, who's sent us a message.
Yeah,
because I'm sure we'll both nod the end to that. Well, thanks so much. Thanks so much, Alan. I appreciate your time. Thanks so much. Well, thanks very much for joining us, and hopefully we'll see you again in a couple of weeks. And bye for now.